Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's STEAM Time. My name is Lisa. I work with the Tampa Hillsborough County Public Library, and I'm super excited to bring to you a program today about how you can make your own board games at home. So we're going to go through all the nitty-gritty details of what makes up a board game, and then we'll have some activity time where we'll work on making a board game from scratch together. Now, for those of you watching at home, this is an activity that works for all kinds of age levels. So you can really adjust this up or down in terms of difficulty and complexity. And we'll go through the details of how we're going to make that happen. So let's get started. We're going to jump right in. So our goals today are going to be to learn about the different elements of a board game. What makes it up? What are the pieces and parts, and how does it work? Then we're going to use some tools to calculate our spacing and design the layout of our board game. And then we're going to actually put one together and do a quick, super quick DIY board game. And then you can take that and make it more advanced, make it more colorful and technical after the program. So what elements make up a board game? So there are 1,000,001 answers to this. There are a lot of different ideas about what exactly make it up. So to keep it really simple, I broke it down into 3 parts. So the 3 parts we're going to talk about are the theme, the mechanics, and the components. So when we think of the theme of the board game, we're talking about what is the game about? Why are we playing it? Is there a story? Is it maybe about tactics? What's the idea here? If it's a story, is it an adventure? What are we looking at? What's the idea? What does it look like? For the mechanics, we're going to talk about how the game is played. So the theme is what's it about. Mechanics is kind of how do we do it? Is it a game that's based on a lot of rules? Does it need instructions, or is it something that you can just pick up and go? How does it work? What are the ways that we can make it work? And components is the physical stuff that the game is made of. So does it have a board? Maybe, maybe not. Does it have player tokens? What are the different parts and components that we need to make that game playable? So let's get into themes. I mentioned it before, what are we doing? What's the game about? Why are we playing it? So 2 big differences in board games that you might see are storytelling versus competition. Some games are really built from the ground up that all of the actions and choices that you make tell a big story. So in the most obvious form, that might be role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, where as you make choices, that story changes. It's a choose-your-own-adventure board game style. Or maybe is it really more about the competition element? Is it more about gaining more points than your opponent? So those are 2 big ways that we can break down the theme of a board game in terms of what it's about. So I went even further here and I broke this down even more. So there are a lot more different ways to break down what a board game is and what types there are. But I broke it down for us here, abstract board games. So we're talking chess and checkers, where there's no story. There's not a picture that it makes. It's very much geometry and math and calculating those moves. Is it maybe a game that's more about area control or building a route? So you might think of games like Risk or Ticket to Ride, where you're controlling a field there. Is it more about deduction? Maybe some Clue or One Night Werewolf, or maybe it's Battleship, where all of the information that you get might give you a clue to what the next way to win the game is. There's some board games that don't even have a board at all. They might be more about dexterity. So how can you manipulate things with your hands in a way that'll let you win? So we think of Jenga, puzzle building games where you physically build a structure and see who can maybe be the last one to topple it over. Or a game like Operation, where you have to be very dexterous or have very fine motor skills to get your piece out without it buzzing. Of course, there are party games. Those are very social games that are really designed to get to know people. good for icebreakers maybe. So you think of games like Apples to Apples and things like that, where it's very quick, it's easy to set up. There's usually not a lot of in-depth rules to learn. It's more about the social aspect and hanging out and getting to know folks. There's the very, very classic roll and move games. And this is what we're going to start with a little bit later on. So think games like Candyland or Snakes and Ladders, where you figure out how many spaces you're going to move, and you move your little character along that board. Maybe you do an action, maybe not. Maybe you just work your way through a maze. But you either roll a dice or spin a spinner to figure out how many spaces you're going to go, and you're going to move your meeple or your character. And then there's the big campaign games. So we're thinking Dungeons and Dragons and Gloomhaven, games like that. So campaign might be something that you do one time, or it might be a series of campaigns that you go through. So look at those. We're going to go into more depth. We can absolutely go into more depth during the question and answer session. So remember, if you have any questions as we go along, type those into the questions box, and at the end of the program, I'll go through those and read them for you. So now we're going to get into our game mechanics. So two big elements of game mechanics are we have to figure out when we're making the game, is this a game of strategy or is it a game of luck? So strategy games, while there might be elements of luck in there, the main way you're going to win is by carefully planning your moves, being very strategic. Games that are based more on luck are going to be won by random chance. So you might have a strategy to move your odds one way or the other, but the primary way you're going to win is to be lucky enough to roll maybe the right number of your dice. It's going to be mostly a luck-based game. So that's two big ways to break it down when we're deciding our gameplay. The other way we can look at mechanics is things like, is it a game where we're building or gathering resources? So we're going to go through that game and we're going to earn tokens, or we're going to earn resources. And as we gather those, we can use those resources to maybe make something bigger. So maybe think in Monopoly, if you have your 3 houses built on your address, you can trade those in for a hotel, for example. So you've gathered those 3 resources, and once you've gathered those, you were able to build something bigger. So that's what we're thinking when we talk about resource building. You have tile laying games, where sometimes you might be building the board as you go along. You might not have a board with a path already on there. So think games like Carcassonne, where each tile has a section of a road or a map or a path. And as you lay your tiles down to connect to each other, you build the picture as you go along. There are classic memory games. So these are fun. They can be done all sorts of different ways, but basically you're going to take turns with your game partner to turn over cards or to reveal tokens. And once you have a matching pair, you've won it. And at the end of the game, the person who's made the most matches wins. Then you have a little bit of a meanie game. Sometimes people call these the mean games. We call them the take that games or the battle games. So these games are all about attacking your opponent. So you, by any means necessary, you want to win this game. So you're going to do your best to knock your other player out. So these are all about the attacks. So think games like Sorry or Munchkin. That's the whole point of this game, is to attack your opponent and earn the most points. And then we already mentioned it before, the roll and move game. So you're going to roll the dice or you're going to spin the spinner and follow a path to figure out what you're going to do for your action. So we've got our theme, we've got mechanics. Now we're going to talk components. So the 4 big things that we're going to look at is the board. What are we playing on? Is it an actual board that our board game is going to be on, or maybe is it just an open table that we're going to use to build things on top of? Maybe we don't have a board, maybe we're laying tiles down and then using pieces on top of that. So that's one thing to figure out when you're creating your game, is how you're gonna, what kind of surface you're gonna be working on. Then you have to decide how you're gonna take your actions. Are you gonna maybe spin a spinner, roll your dice? Are you gonna maybe turn over a card that'll give you an action that you need to do as part of the game? Are there maybe timers involved where once it's your turn, the timer gets flipped over and you only have that amount of time to either write the word or make your choice? So you have to decide how you're going to do your actions. Is it going to be randomly by a roll of the dice? Is it going to be by revealing cards? That's something to look at. And then how do we identify our players? So as you're playing along, you want to know who's getting the points, who's winning, who's where on the board. So how are you going to identify the players and maybe the other objects that you're interacting with? So some of the things that we see in board games that we call them pawns. So if you think of maybe chess pieces, so they have different figures that represent different parts that can move in different ways. Some games call them meeple. So they're little person-shaped objects, little tokens that are shaped like people, and they call them meeple. Are we maybe using miniatures? So Dungeons and Dragons, Gloomhaven, games like that, maybe Warhammer. You have a little figurine that represents what your character's attributes are, maybe what kind of profession they're in, what they look like. And some of them are very, very simple, where it's just a basic shape. Some of them are very elaborate and painted and very detailed. So you have your miniatures, and sometimes it might just be tokens. So think of a chip, or maybe just a button or a magnet, just a simple physical thing that you can put on that board and move around to indicate that that's you. And lastly, tracking progress. How are we keeping track of who's winning? How are we keeping track of how many points we have? There's a lot of different ways to do that. Some people will gather those tokens that we used earlier in the game, and you collect those as you go along to indicate how many points you have. Sometimes the board will have a scoring component right on the board where you can move your token up or down depending on how many points you have. Or maybe it's a role-playing game and you have a character sheet where as your character performs actions or wins or loses, you get plus or minus points. So decide how you're going to track your progress, how you're going to track your points. So those are our game components. So I put a quick supply list up here on the board. This was also in the sign up when you registered for this course. So kind of take a quick look at that. These are just some of the tools that you'll be able to use to make your board game. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want. So when I show you what I did it very simply. I used some cereal boxes that I cut up, and I used crayons and markers to draw on what we were going to do. You could also do that with just scrap paper, or maybe you have a hard time using crayons, maybe you have a hard time manipulating things with your hands. So maybe you'll use your computer to create a design and you'll just print it out on a sheet of paper. That works great as well. So I'll show you how that works. And then you just need your general supplies to kind of glue things together and decorate and attach things to each other. So it depends on what specific type of objects you can use. There's a million different ways to combine these, but these are just some basic ideas of things that you can use. Hold this over. So this is a quick board game that I put together, just using computer, using Word. I just made a route and a map, and I gave some different options. And I'll show you what that looks like on our board. Let me get this pulled up here so you can see it nice and big. All right, so make sure you can see here. This is our board game that I printed out. I have some trouble making sure I have straight lines with my hands. That's difficult for me, so I used the computer to make my straight lines. And I was able to make everything line up very evenly to make my map. So we can use a whiteboard like this that's magnetic. So this is a fun way to do it if you're maybe going on a road trip and you're gonna be traveling a lot. Maybe you wanna make this a magnetic game just like this. So using this, you can decide which one of these magnets is gonna be your player. So we got player 1. I'm trying to draw upside down, bear with me. There we go. So those are our player numbers there. And how are we going to decide how many spaces to go? Well, one way that you can decide how many spaces to go is to roll your dice. Let's see if we can see this on the screen here. I've got a couple of examples here of different kinds of dice that we might be using. So some dice will just have dots on them. So this is very easy. You take and you count the number of dots, and that's how many spaces you move. Some dice actually have the numbers written on them. So some of us read better reading numbers as numerals, and some of us might have a better or easier time understanding numbers if they're in a countable format. So that's just one way to consider what type of dice you use. Is some people read numbers better like this, and some people read numbers better like this. That's one way to figure out how many spaces our players are going to move. But what if you don't have any dice at home? Not everyone has these laying around. Well, you can make a spinner. So all you do is you take a piece of cardboard, some cereal box cut up. You divide your area. Maybe you divide it into 4. Maybe you divide it into more parts, depending on how many people are playing with you that day. And to figure out whose turn it is, you need a little arrow to spin it. Well, all I did was I took a paper clip and I poked the paper clip carefully through. If you're someone who might be a little bit on the smaller side, make sure you have a grown-up with you to help you poke that through so you don't poke your fingers. But you just poke it through and turn the end over so that it's still able to spin. And then there we go. Click that. You can adjust it. If it's maybe too tight on there to spin, you can adjust it. So it looks like we are going, oh, well, let's go more than one space at a time. Let's go 2 spaces at a time. So our spinner landed on 2. So player 1 can start here and then go 2 spaces. For those of you at home, if you're hanging out with us, if you have a spinner, feel free to type your number in there if you have one at home. Maybe if you have some dice at home, let me know what you rolled. I will move your character for you. Let's see what else we have. Oh, we've got player 2 is going 1 space. Oh, we've got another 2 spacers here. So player 3 is going to go 2 spaces. So that's how we move. So let's pretend we have just the 3 players. So this is our player 1 here. It looks like they are going to go 6 places. So they can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places. That puts them over there. So you just work your way around that map and you figure out how many spaces you're going to move. You might have special spaces on your, when you create it, that can do special things. Like this one here will let the player move in any direction, or this one here will let the player go again. You can do whatever you want on here. You could have a silly action. So, you know, have one be, you can go two spaces, but only if you do the hokey pokey. You can make it be whatever you want it to be. So figure out what you want your turns to be, what actions are required to make your move. And you can just write those right on here. And because it's magnetic, it's not going to fall away on you if you're maybe on a road trip, or maybe you're outside and it's windy. Maybe you're at the beach playing. So this is an easy way to have it as a magnetic game. And this is just printed out on regular paper, but you don't even have to have it printed. You could just draw your map directly on the board itself. Maybe you'll have your spaces like that, and you'll write your actions on here. And decide how your characters are going to go that way. So that's another way that you can create your game, is just to simply draw it out using a whiteboard and then erase it when you're ready to make a different game. Works great for doing things like tic-tac-toe as well. Are we going to call that a board game? Maybe. So remember, type your questions in as we go along, and we'll do our best to answer them. Okay, so I've got another option for you here. And you're looking at this and you're going, Lisa, this is Uno. This is a game that already exists. I wanted to make my own board game. Ha ha ha, my friend. So you can take your Uno cards, if you have them, or regular playing cards, or scrap pieces of paper, and you can make a memory game. So memory games are very basic. We turn over cards. Oh, not a match. And then we remember where those cards are, hopefully. Oh, not a match. So you just go through and take turns revealing cards and make your matches. So all you do is you gather your deck of cards and make sure you have 2 of each thing. You can use however many cards you want. Maybe you just want to do a small field like this. You keep it simple. So this is another really fun game that you can do with pretty much anything. You can use Uno cards, you can use playing cards, you can use scrap pieces of paper that you cut up evenly. You just write maybe a number, or maybe you draw a picture on the other side and match the 2 pictures together. It's also fun to do maybe if you're at a family reunion. Maybe you have a printed sheet that has people's pictures on it, and do the memory game with the different faces. So that's another way you can do it. I've also seen some people have it as little boxes. And as you lift the lid on the box, it reveals a token inside, and you match the 2 matching tokens. So memory is a super easy DIY game that you can make out of pretty much anything. All right, let me pull this back up. There we go. All right, so that was our hands-on portion, just really quick, because this is a very short session here. So I showed you how I did those 2 quick games myself. We're not expecting you to create a game from scratch live while we're watching. We just gave you some ideas and some pointers on how you can get started. If you want to follow along, where you can pause and start again as you go along, you can always find these on our YouTube channel. You'll go to our YouTube channel at Tampa Hills Live. We usually upload these about a week or so, within a week or so of the program being live. And that way you can follow along from home and kind of pause it whenever you need it. So that's the QR link here that will take you directly to it. And we want to make sure that you're able to do this with some really fancy professional level instructions at home. So I've got a couple of resources here on you, for you on Hoopla. So on Hoopla, you know that this is one of our fun ebook resources that has no waiting, no holds. If you find it on here, you can check it out right away. You can look at some children's games from around the world, get ideas of what people play in different parts of the world. You can make maybe a DIY board game tournament. So that's a fun instruction book there. Or cool board games. So this is going to be more of the crafting how-to, where you can make these kinds of games at home on your own. It has some fun ideas and pointers in there. I noticed that they use some magnets in some of their games too. So check that out. Those are fun. They're on Hoopla. And you can find those. Go to hcplc.org/ebooks. That'll give you the instructions on how to get to Hoopla. You just log in with your library card and you get all those goodies. So question and answer time. I'm seeing some questions in here about how to get the instructions for how to do the game. So yep, you just pop onto our YouTube channel and you can follow along, being able to stop and pause whenever you want to. So if anybody else has questions, definitely type those in for me and we'll go through them. Or if I showed you something and you want me to go back to it, there's a screen that you want me to show again that you had questions on, just let me know. I can go back to it and give you more information on that. Looks like we have some pros on here tonight. We really don't have any questions. Does this work for kindergarten? Yes, so there's somebody asking if it works for kindergartners. Absolutely. All of these games can be adjusted. You can make them as complicated or as simple as you want them to be. So they can be tailored to anyone's skill level. If it's something that requires some dexterity, it can definitely be scaled for that. Maybe you have someone that might have difficulty with fine motor skills, so they have trouble grasping small objects. You can make that board really, really big. So maybe instead of using a cereal box, maybe you make a really big board that's maybe from a delivery box that you got at home. And instead of having a very small token or meeple, maybe you use big objects, like maybe you use a cup to represent the player. That's also an option. So yeah, you can definitely adjust those to all kinds of skill levels and abilities and dexterities. That's the fun thing about making these at home, is that you can make them be exactly what you need them to be. All right, looks like that's the end of our questions. So after our program, we always send out a survey. So let us know how we did. Let us know if you have any questions or if you have ideas about a program or a topic you'd like to see us do in the future. We always want to make these programs for you, so we can't make it for you if we don't know what you want. So fill out that survey, let us know what kind of topics you'd like to see in future sessions. You can always reach us anytime at hcplc.org/contact. That has all of our contact information, from our email to our wonderful Ask a Librarian resource. I know sometimes we don't want to get on the phone and talk to somebody on the phone. Nobody wants to do that these days, but with the Ask a Librarian feature, you can chat or text with a librarian, one of our local ones here instead. And if you do this project at home, let me know how it turned out. We love getting the pictures and the stories of what you've done with these activities. So take a picture, send us a story at hcplc.org/stories. We would love to see those, maybe feature them on our social media. So I hope you had fun today. I know I did. I love a good board game and I love a good arts and crafts. So this is a fun way to bring that together. So we will see you next time for our next theme time session. I think we're making snow globes next though. Stay tuned, keep an eye out on our calendar, hcplc.org/events. So we will see you soon. Thanks everyone.